Hi, everybody. Welcome to The New Normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Like Queen Lisa. And today, Dr. Reg has the Soviet experience to share with us, talking more about micronutrition. And before we jumped on, we were chatting a little bit. And so at the end of this video, I'm going to share something he shared with me. Could be a linking to some Black Swan event coming up. We'll see. So you guys stay tuned, give us a like, share the video, and we'll be right back with Dr. Reg McDaniel. Merry Christmas, Dr. McDaniel, and welcome back.
Hello there.
Good to see you. Good to see you. I hope you had a great holiday with your friends and family.
Very much so.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back. I know I received the PowerPoint, and we just really appreciate all the time that you spend educating us with the facts about nutrition and how, we can help heal our bodies, help our bodies heal themselves.
Well, as I was telling you, this story, this journey started in 1985, and it was the middle of the road, conventional science and medicine and pharmacology, working with the Food and Drug Administration, trying to make a new drug from the active principle in aloe leaf gel. We thought we were just trying to develop a new antiviral agent, but we found out by the mechanism of action and how it participated in cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules that the active ingredient from aloe was effective against all infectious agents. When I say all infectious agents, I mean not only bacteria, but various viruses, even viruses in animals and plants that I had never heard of. And ultimately, we got reports from Africa that children that usually die from chronic malaria and having periodic fevers and chills and red cell destruction, and they quit growing. And I was not aware at the time that the number one cause of death of children on planet Earth is chronic malaria. Well, by taking this active ingredient, which was from the aloe plant, they quit having fever, chills, started growing, and went back to school and did well in school. And we even got reports that they excelled in athletics. But that wasn't the end of the story. The next thing, we thought we had the most powerful immune or host defense molecule that had ever been found, then it would be naturally in the aloe plant.
Yeah.
And this story just kept growing, and finally we found out it supports cellular synthesis to try to move biochemistry and physiology to the normal zone. Our genes are organized in a manner much like thermostat on the wall, except the thermostat turns on air conditioning if it gets too hot, and it'll turn on the furnace if it gets too cold. Well, it's not for comfort the way the genes are put together, it's for the normal zone. And that is good health. And
yeah, that's where you were seeing some results, or some people were seeing their bodies heal themselves when they had autoimmune disorders, things like that. That's where you're saying that it's not always functioning in that high mode like the air conditioner. Sometimes you have to turn on the heater.
Well, today I had a call from Utah from a lady that had chronically over the years hypothyroidism due to an autoantibody against her thyroid. And by taking this New Eden dietary supplementation formulation, all her tests are getting normal on her thyroid, and she's going to be able to quit taking synthetic thyroid. And of course, she's happy. But I have this series I've been doing with you because it's if you look in the dictionary about faith, it will say belief without evidence. is what faith is based on. But what I'm trying to do, which is even more powerful than that faith, is to know absolutely that science has been done to support the power of more comprehensive nutrition that supports what our genes do in cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules to get us to the normal zone or normal health. And it started out in the middle of the road science, and it's become virtually a spiritual journey, because in the plant kingdom are the molecules that our genes require, not only for the energies like in potatoes and wheat and various macro diets for the calories for energy for the body, but phytonutrients to add to amino acids, fatty acids, and carbohydrates in the cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules to move to the normal zone, which is not something that I've come up with. I keep telling people I haven't discovered anything. I haven't come up with anything new. This is ancient wisdom that has been antagonistically treated by the health industry,
The
because,
medical industrial complex.
well, we could say that, but that what we need to, I have another name for it. First, it struck me that I didn't know that the DNA, or the nucleic acid, in all the animals and in human is just like the DNA that's in the plant kingdom. And that gave you a lot to think about when you think we're surrounded by people say there is no intelligent design in life. If you had created life once, why would you start all over again? And why in the world? The second thing I found out is that everything we need for good health has been provided in plants to correct abnormalities to move us to the normal zone. That's an awful lot of challenge. And I came up with the realization that there is a creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe that is very active and cannot be denied. So all these good things that have happened, as I say, it turned from a middle of the road science to a spiritual journey to realize this activity. And when I mentioned the faith is belief without evidence, with these series of lectures, I'm trying to share with you not only the empiric experiences. Some people will say, well, it's just anecdotal when you start talking about lots of people. But however, if you put a lot of anecdotal reports of benefits for the same thing in different cities, different states, and then in different countries, it creates a profile that says, hey, some science ought to be done to find out what is going on as a mechanism of action for this. And so I have attempted in these series to show you independent people that have absolutely nothing to do with me, that because they saw things they had never seen before that drugs cannot do. With more optimal nutrition, you can accomplish benefits in your health that no medical center on earth can touch, because they're dedicated to drugs, which the father of pharmacology, Paracelsus, the most noted person in world history from Switzerland's most famous quote, and he's called the father of Western pharmacology. He's quoted, quote, all drugs are poisons. The benefit depends on the dose. And it hasn't changed in over 500 years. And if you watch your TV ads about all the new great drugs that are in patent that are available, in the first part of it, they'll have handsome, beautiful people and vivid colors and wonderful music. And all of a sudden, they go black and white, and they talk as fast as they can, telling you that this new drug can destroy your bone marrow, your liver, your kidneys, cause strokes, heart attacks.
I think that's their satanic karmic, what do they call it? Where they have to present what they're doing that they know is evil, to To
They have
have their
they have to reveal all this because
mhm,
in court they basically say you can't hold us responsible if we've told you and informed you before you take it of
mhm,
all these toxicities and side effects. As Paracelsus said, all drugs are poisons.
mhm.
Well, we got thrown out of the FDA trying to make a drug of this because we could not kill any animals. And we gave it 3,000 milligrams a day to undergraduate students at the University of Texas. And on a graduated dose of sterile material, we injected in medical students in Houston. And not only did we not kill one of them, but they had good benefits. Their
Yeah.
skin proper skin improved. Those that were losing hair, their hair got more luxurious, and many people that had never been able to go to a manicurist said their fingernails are growing out and they have beautiful fingernails and they're enjoying it. And good things is what happened. Well, what I wanted to say is belief or knowledge based on facts, which I'm trying to present to you, is much more powerful than just belief on faith. And so there's an interaction by the mind, which is the function of the brain, to control uh, everything in the body. And if you know and you're surrounded by relatives and professionals that will tell you that the only thing you can do if you've got a problem, it doesn't matter whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, there's a drug for it. Well, actually, in the creative, organizing, designing power in the universe, put in the plant kingdom molecules that are used in cellular synthesis that are not toxic. They're
Yes.
utilized. And actually, a company in London sent me to Belgium twice when they were developing for the European Common Market new laws for regulation of drugs and dietary supplements. And what I pointed out is that all drugs are poisons. And through a seriously flawed evaluation process, they're reclassified as prescription drugs, but they're still poisons. And that's why you get these toxicities and side effects that you hear about on television real rapidly in black and white. But that nutrition in the plants that have these plant-made nutrients, phytonutrients, are incorporated in the molecular structure of compounds to run the biochemistry of life. And so when you know, and no one can shake you by all the evidence that I'm trying to present to you, your mind, you've heard of the placebo effect. Well, some people think that's a false effect. It's not a false effect. It's what the body can do with what it thinks and believes and controls all the systems of your body. And today I'm going to give you one that is very arm length because not only is it independent, this was all research done in Russia behind the Iron Curtain. And with that, I invite you to start the PowerPoint. And this is the cover of a little syllabus I put together. And I have a book here that was brought to me at this time. That's by I.N. Tordovo, and it's called Bioactive Compounds, Transforms, and Biological Action. Now, the chapters in this book are very detailed and scientific, and the event, if you'll give me the next slide,
Mhm.
I will show you that in 1999,
99, yeah.
Dr. Benjamin Treboshnik, who was a sports physician, came to Dallas, and I spent 2 days with him. And he had a very interesting story that I want to share with you. He said, when the Iron Curtain went down, that the Communist Party brought all the research physicians that worked with human beings to Moscow, and they said, we want you to develop something to give to the Russian citizen that their physical and mental performance will be superior to everybody else on earth. And I thought that was brilliant, because so often when a nation gets strong, they want to overpower other nations. But what they wanted to do is to make people want to be Russian citizens or be under the communist influence. Well, Dr. Trubashnik's claim to fame was that he was a team physician, and he took the Russian team to Mexico City, and they broke all types of records. Sometimes they would give a new first place, a second place, and a third place, and they thought they must be using some kind of drugs or something. They could find nothing that was illegal that they were doing and performing so well. And what he was saying is that what the communists asked them to develop, they developed from extracts and powders from the plant kingdom, which they called adaptogens. If you'll give me the next slide, that he said that behind the Iron Curtain for about 40 years across all the time zones, and he told me, he said, if you can read 12 different languages, I can bring you a truckload of books and scientific articles that were developed behind the Iron Curtain to develop these adaptogens. And he said that one of the key investigators that ran this realized that in Siberia, they have this plant that's called the Russian ginseng, and the real scientific name is Erythrococcus sensicollis, and that they used research with this, and as I'm going to show you, and since all of this were in these foreign languages, you need to know that in London, there was a scientist who was also a linguist, and to summarize all this research, the communists had to translate it into Russian so they could understand what all this team that they were financing was doing. He pointed out that millions of rubles, and I, at this point, want to point out that no research can be done on anything until somebody somewhere somehow pays for it. And the amount of government funding for this research will never be done again, but it was all developed around the Erythrococcus sensicollis, or the Russian ginseng, to give to people to improve their mental functions, their physical functions, and to move their body's biochemistry and physiology to the normal zone. And this individual in London who could read Russian developed an article that was in the British Journal of Phytotherapy that's in English, where Dr. Trubashnik brought me this article as file that I have of these papers summarized that I'm going to be sharing with you, because not only is this independent scientific research that supports the power of more comprehensive nutrition, which amounts to personal, preventive, and interventional health management. If you don't like the term God's plan for health and healing, when I say God, I'm talking about the organizing, creating, and designing power in the universe that's responsible for the incredible power of the programming that is in our genes, that's written in DNA, that tells the cells on a little assembly line that I've shown you before in lectures to hook together nutrient molecules to make compounds to run the biochemistry of life. And so give me the next slide, please.
Okay.
I pointed out that they actually had untold millions of dollars, and how the first time that the Western nations were aware of something going on behind the Iron Curtain was these athletes down in Mexico City that just performed incredibly well. And give me the next slide, please. They recognize this Erythrococcus sensicollis, pardon me.
I'm glad you had trouble saying it. I have trouble hearing it. So
It
that's a tough one.
adapted to the environment because they had in Siberia periods of when it's terribly hot and dry,
Okay.
and this plant flourished. Then they had periods of when it was so cold it still would break like glass, and also wet seasons, and still this plant could adapt to all these environmental conditions. So they use the term adaptogen for what in the Western countries we called it dietary supplement or nutraceuticals. There's nutrition that works like pharmaceuticals to move things to the normal zone. So what we might say now is this, what benefit does this adaptogen research have? Number one, it supports with amounts of research and money that we never could get together in our country to do, which I'll show you in a minute. And what evidence that there was a benefit in human use? Give me the next slide, please. I point out that I think that Dr. Trebashnik came to Texas with a goal to tell us about his adaptogen formulation that he developed behind the Iron Curtain in hopes of selling it to us here in Texas. However, when he got here and he found out our research done on aloe-ace manning, he was shocked. Fact is, he said, I cannot believe that you have come up with something that is better than the decades and the millions of rubles spent to develop our adaptogen, because he said it was the molecule that is in the Erythrococcus is primarily a plant sterol. And if you know anything about steroids, you have to be very careful in this hormonal support of human performance, because if you take it too high or too long, your benefits begin to drop. And it's like for our athletes, we had to tune it. We had to know when the performance date or when they were going to run or lift or do whatever they're going to do, and not start it too soon or too high and had to tune it. However, our product made from the aloe-ace manning, we just gave it to people, and the more they took, the better they did. You didn't have to tune it.
That's really interesting, especially with the, people talk about having too much soy in your diet and how it can cause you to have hormonal effects and side effects from eating so much soy. And then they're talking about the sterols too. So this makes a lot of sense. So then the aloe-ace manning is more stable and doesn't affect your hormones in that negative way.
Well, I'll eventually show you their formulation in a slide and our formulation beside it and show you the differences. But one of the things he said here at Carrington Laboratories, where we worked with 12 institutions at about, maybe 10 or 15 on the company staff and no more than 50 in the institutions that we were working with a few $1,000. He says, how in the world could you come up with something better than our adaptogen research? We spent decades and millions of rubles on, and thousands of N values in not only animals but in humans. how'd you come up with this with just a little handful of people and virtually no money by comparison? And my response to him, well, we've got a saying here in Texas, I'd a whole lot rather be lucky than smart. But I may have overstated that because of the things that have happened that I'm putting in this book I'm trying to write. It seems like the creative organizing, designing power in the universe was at our shoulder, whispering to us, telling us what to do and making things happen, that you can't have enough money to create the environment or the things to happen that have happened over the years. And that's part of why I say this turned in from a middle of the road science to a spiritual journey. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Now, this is from that article that the Englishman did in the British Phytotherapy Journal, is at the Volga tank plant in Russia. They had, I believe it's, I can't remember how many thousand workers that they began to give their adaptogen formula in the morning and afternoon tea breaks. In the year 1973 is the reference year for in the red is the number of workers that were sick and can come to work. And I'm trying to read that figure there, but it's 418, I believe.
Yeah,
and then the number of days of absenteeism is about 296 in the reference year. Now, they started in 1974, put in their adaptogen formula in their tea. Everybody over there drank tea, apparently, kind of like the English. And you can see in 74 it dropped, in 75 it dropped, 76 it dropped, 77, 78, 79, until it was only workers sick reported, 2.7 per thousand, and 11 days of absence. Well, they asked the question. This is in a big, huge assembly line building. What if we insulted the workers more and expose them to the environment? Why can they come to work? So give me the next slide. It's from this article. And I'm just telling here that, yes, there were 13,089 assembly line workers in the plant. That is an incredible.
That's a lot. That's quite a study group.
Observations. It would take millions of dollars to do that in our capitalist economy. And you saw the benefits that it dropped from down to 2.7 in the 6th year, as it points out. And let's go to the next slide.
And then on to the absentee.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in this one, they had truck drivers, and it's per 1,000 employees. And my understanding, there were several thousand employees. I think our next slide will tell us how many. But this was the three. Let's go back to that slide.
Okay, stay on this one.
Why these people were sick, and it was from influenza, from high blood pressure, or regulatory metabolic disease. And then the number one cause of death in our developed countries is ischemic heart disease. You can see the graph there in 73, the reference year when they were not getting the adaptogen. The influenza, they had 294 cases. The hypertensive cases that didn't come to work, 171. And I cannot read that figure. I believe it's
282 or 292.
Yeah, 282 for ischemic heart disease. Now look what happened when they started putting their adaptogen formula in their morning and afternoon tea break in 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79. Now step back and think about any business or any health program that you see advertised on TV. Think about Medicare, Medicaid, any source that's paying for
Yeah.
deviations from normal health of what more comprehensive nutrition, which is what they were doing with their adaptogen research. And let's go to the next slide, and I think we can find there a little more about I don't think they did it per thousand, because I think it was in the more than 10,000 total, but to try to put this in a graphic form to understand, they put those figures that I showed you on the graph per thousand employees. Now let's go to the next slide. Now this is the Soviet adaptogen formula, and we've got it in the order of the amount of the different components of their adaptogen formula. The number one was from the plant sterols from the Erythrococcus sensicollis. Then they had phytochemicals, or plant-made molecules that are used in the cellular synthesis. Then they had particularly the carbohydrate group, glyconutrients, vitamins and minerals. And this is that R.J. Collins, a 1991 article by British Phytotherapy. Now, below it is what I was brought in 1985 to be a consultant. And it was built around the glyconutrients, or the aloase mannan, or acetylated mannose, and acetylated sugar that can be classified as a glyconutrient. It's the number one component, as you saw number 3 in the Russian formulation. Then we had phytochemicals from other plants. Then from the Mexican yam, we had plant sterols as a smaller amount of our formulations, then in vitamins and minerals. And this was first revealed in 1999 in an article by Dr. Cates in San Antonio. So this is the comparison of the two, and why what we developed at Carrington Laboratories was more practical, that you could just take it, because it was primarily glyconutrients, then phytonutrients, and then the plant sterols, which can cause a problem. And the adaptogen formula, the main thing in it was the plant sterols. This is what blew Dr. Trebashnik's mind, that what we had worked so much better. Next slide, please. Now, the point I wanted to make is that the amount of rubles and the millions of and the thousands of experiments that were done across 12 time zones in Russia could never be duplicated again, because of what the communist goal was. And what we found out is that our products were used in cellular synthesis to make the bioactive molecules that operate the biochemistry and the physiology of life. Next slide, please. Well, we'd say, how does this relate to the previous lectures we had? Well, before, I've shown you the periodic table of all the elements that have been found on planet Earth and even in space, and that there's approximately 100 different elements here, and not a one of them have any of the properties of life. But the most remarkable thing is that with the programming of the DNA that is in our genes and our chromosomes that control cellular synthesis. You can take about 20 of these elements, and with the programming that is in the cells, that lo and behold, when you combine these and hook them together to make compounds, the property of life exists. Now, the next slide is what I've shown you before, that in each cell, and I have a diagram there, or a cartoon for their different shapes and different organs and all that's there on the left. And there's an assembly line in each side cell that is the ribosome, then the big long thing at the top called the endoplasmic reticulum, and then to the right, the Golgi, that on this assembly line, the biochemistry, like you see in the middle of the cell, takes place to make down at the bottom all the structure and functional molecules of the body are made on this assembly line. When we say structure and function, we're talking about skin, bones, tendons, organ tissues like lungs, kidneys, heart. But then there are white cells that are mobile, and then there are enzymes like digestive enzymes and synthetic enzymes that are functional and very important in our brain, which I was trying to make an emphasis when we started out, for you to know in your brain, stored in knowledge, that all of this science supports what is going on to support that more comprehensive nutrition is so good for health. Now, the next slide that I want you to see is a simplification of what you just saw, is that just a few blocks from where I'm sitting, there's always an assembly line. It takes up a city block, and railroad cars and trucks bring in parts, and they put them together on the assembly line, and out comes completed trucks. And they look right and they work. And that is kind of what a good analogy for what happens on that assembly line in our cells. Each cell is like an ultra micro little factory that has this assembly line in it. And we take parts that are food units and we start chewing them up in our mouth to get them smaller. And then enzymes begin to, like, chop them up till you get down to molecular size, so that in the intestines, dissolved in water, these parts are taken into the blood, and then flowing in the blood in the serum phase are piped around to all the cells, each cell like a little minute factory. And inside there is that assembly line that, under the control of the genes, hook these nutrient parts together, and we are physically proper if all the instructions are right and if the nutrition is right. Makes our body and makes it function. That's a attempt to try to communicate what that assembly line is that's I've just shown you. Let's go to the next slide. In that assembly line plant, the engineers give them instructions and books and magazines and charts of how to hook all the parts together. Well, inside the cell, inside the nucleus, these are the chromosomes. And to the right is where you've had a single white cell in the peripheral blood, and you put a fluorescent dye in it and also a plant extract called colchicine, and all the chromosomes will line up and take up this dye, and in UV light they will glow. You take a picture of this, and then with scissors you cut them to the longest to the shortest, as we see on the left, which is called a karyotype. And these are the plans that operate the assembly line I've just shown you that's in each cell. And this, incidentally, is a male, because we see down there at the bottom where it says X and Y, if this were a female, there would be two X's there beside each other. But there's a tiny little spot for the Y, and this produces a male genetically. So this is part of the analogy of the assembly line, like General Motors, that is controlled by this incredible, powerful code that is in these chromosomes that are made up of nucleic acids. Let's have the next slide, please. One of the things I wanted to point out is that I mentioned that potatoes and flour and wheat and all produce primarily molecules that are used for energy. And our mitochondria that are in each cell, this is a UV computerized thing that is, these are liver cells, and where you see a black spot in the center, just black, that's where the nucleus is. But out in the cytoplasm around the nucleus, you can see little tiny threads of yellow, which are mitochondria, which are little fuel cells that take carbohydrate molecules and begin to clip off the carbon in the chain. And every time this chain is made up of plants that, with photosynthesis, the energy from the sun, takes carbons from carbon dioxide that we breathe out and comes from fermentation in the environment. And a little bit of energy is put in the bond between each carbon molecule. Well, these little yellow mitochondria that you can see in this special $1 million microscope hooked up to a spectrophotometer and a computer, transfer that energy that's in the food, like wheat, to phosphate molecules that make ATP that allows me to flex my hands and move my arms and legs, but also is used to make energy to hook together to make on the cellular assembly line in the cell compounds. Well, what I'm getting around to is that these little mitochondria develop free radicals and nascent oxygen molecules. It's not O2, but O1. What's the problem about oxygen like this? Nearly everyone knows about rust, how steel, it's ferric, and it doesn't have oxygen on it, but it'll rust and become ferrous. Another example is more adaptable to living tissues, is nearly everyone knows about rancid butter or rancid peanut butter or rancid oils. Well, these mitochondria essentially develop free radicals that if they attach to membranes inside the cell, or worst of all, if they attach to DNA, they alter the information there, and this is called a mutation. Well, lo and behold, the creative organizing, designing power in the universe, in the genes, make compounds that quench or grab these nascent oxygen or free radicals so that they don't attach to the chromosomes and change the information there, or alter the function of membranes. And this is a demonstration that glutathione made by the genes is the blue that you see there around the mitochondria to grab these free radicals and nascent oxygen molecules so that they won't alter the information that's in the DNA or the function of the cell membranes. In addition, the body, through the creative process, also has in the genes to make superoxide dismutase. And we have green in there and yellow that are copper and zinc linked superoxide dismutase that in this cell where all this energy is necessary for it to run cellular synthesis and to run the metabolic processes, lo and behold, with proper nutrition, you make the molecules that make glutathione, superoxide dismutase, to keep the body in balance inside the cells. Next slide, please. This is just to show you what the computer to this microscope shows you, that you take these liver cells and you challenge them. Down there at the bottom it says patulin. This is an organic molecule that mimics the challenge to the environment inside the cell, like the activity of the mitochondria. And if you have just normal cells that you put the patulin to, you can see that the glutathione level that's on the left there, it just collapses. However, if you've got in the diet the allo-oligosaccharide, that you can see to add it to the cells, that it increases the amount of glutathione and protection against free radicals. And even after 3 hours, if you've added patulin to it, it doesn't destroy all the free radical and nascent oxygen quenching capacity of the cells. Now, I think it's incredible that such intricate provisions are made in the process of creating life. And that's part of what I'm showing you is what has impacted me, that this started out as middle of the road science, and now we can see that the creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe is provided for us to have health if we have the proper nutrition. And because everything that I've been showing you in these last slides require nutrients to be in the diet to make the glutathione and the superoxide dismutase to quench the energy production of the mitochondria inside the cell that provides energy for everything to work. Next slide, please. Well, what does this mean to human health and performance? Next slide, please. In the year 2000, with a researcher, it's down there at the bottom of the page, Dr. Cates in San Antonio. This is the title of the paper that was published. It's objective biomarkers of aging are favorably altered to a more youthful value in association with dietary supplementation. And the number of patients we had were over 670 that were over 50 years of age. And when you added this allo-oligosaccharide, which is in New Eden dietary supplement formulation, bone density increased, which with aging tends to cause osteoporosis or softening of the bone. The percent muscle mass increased in these people, which, as you may know, with aging, you tend to lose muscle mass. So you reverse that. The percent body fat was decreased. And when I look at that, I kind of laugh, because I think of when I had my 28-inch waist belts in the closet. I kept hanging them on the nail, thinking as I got older that I'll sooner or later get back to that. But with virtually tears in my eyes, I threw them away when I had to get 32-inch belts, and now I wear about a 34 to 36-inch belt, because as we age, the amount of fat in our body increases. However, by more optimal nutrition built around the optimal nutrition that associated with the allo-oligosaccharide or ace-mannan, the percent fat decreased. Now, as you probably know, with aging, strokes and heart attacks and diabetes are a big problem associated with diseases of aging. Well, all the serum values of the fats fractions that lead to atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries or narrowing of the arteries that lead to strokes and heart attacks were reduced. And the biomarkers of diabetes, people with elevated hemoglobin A1Cs and elevated blood sugars were brought down. So the quality of life was elevated by our number of 670, which we thought was pretty large until we saw the numbers that the Russians did in their studies. So this is one of the examples that more comprehensive nutrition built around the aloe manning has a significant impact on the health when you add it to your diet. Next slide, please. And there was an anti-aging conference in 1998 in Las Vegas. And what we presented there is that type 2 diabetes is a human model that is virtually epidemic proportions due to overeating and overconsumption of calories that lead to obesity, added to aging, and that we were able to show that by adding this to type 2 diabetes, all the biomarkers of diabetes were returned back to more the normal range. There were 32 diabetics in these cases, and this has been further eliminated by a retired Air Force diabetic clinic at Wichita Falls, Texas, that an internist there had 385 type 2 diabetic individuals that all the biomarkers that are associated with strokes, heart attacks, and the amputation of toes, feet, and legs due to atherosclerosis of peripheral vessels were altered to a more normal value in 385 type 2 diabetics. Next slide, please. This is a chart that's hard to see the things, but it follows the number of patients and that their improvements in their hemoglobin A1C and that their yeast infections went down, their vision improved, high blood pressure came down, and gastrointestinal symptoms that are typical in diabetes were alleviated, and that liver functions were improved, and that the lipids in the blood moved to a more healthy value in these diabetics. Next slide, please. As we're saying, does all of this have any benefit in day-to-day living? And this is the details of the 385 diabetics that were at the Air Force Base in Wichita Falls. And all was added was the ingredients that are in New Eden, built around the aloe oligosaccharides or ace-mannan, and they added also omega-3 fatty acids. And by these diabetics, that their finger stick glucose levels were reduced, that the hemoglobin A1C laboratory values that they periodically get that came down, and this is a measure of damage to the little capillaries in the brain, in the eye retina, and into the small capillaries of the heart, and also the small vessels in your toes, feet, and legs, which when you get stopping up of these vessels, you get ulcers that will not heal, and also osteomyelitis. Well, all of this was altered. And then the lipid values lead to atherosclerosis, and it gets into, as I've lumped them before, the LDL lipids. The L stands for lethal disease, and it went down, whereas the HDL lipids, the H stands for healthy level of these products went up, which is good, which is the reverse of atherosclerosis. There was a reduced need for insulin and oral agents in these diabetics. Weight reductions were documented, which is very good in type 2 diabetics. The need for pharmaceutical drugs for blood pressure were reduced or eliminated. That at the large numbers we had there, we could tell that there was a reduced number of doctor's visits for complications of diabetes, and the number of hospitalizations was reduced, and the cost for operating the diabetic clinic was reduced compared to another clinic where the doctor felt like all you do is use pharmaceutical drugs. And so we had a comparison group, and this group that this internist I worked with more comprehensive nutrition added to anything that they might need as a pharmaceutical, but pushing more comprehensive nutrition, that it estimated that there was a reduced 75% of money that to operate the clinic with adding more comprehensive nutrition. We also found out that if they regularly exercise or walked, say a mile 3 times a week, that everything above there improved, and the patients reported more energy and a better quality of life. And all of this is just what a condition that is, as I say, almost a silent epidemic in our country, because we just eat too much and
the wrong things, for sure.
Sure. Yeah. That there is a practical value of what I've been sharing with you. Next slide, please. I thought I would share with you a little bit of information that I told you that in the year 2000, that the 670 people in this paper that was co-authored with Dr. Cates down in San Antonio, that the biomarkers associated with the disabilities of aging were moved to a more youthful value and their quality of life improved. Well, that was good, but I received an excited phone call from a retired dentist in Kansas City. And he was 71 years old, and he had been taking the aloe-ace mannin for 2 years. And though he was 71 years old, his telomeres were that of a 35 to 50-year-old. Now, what are telomeres? You may not speak that. You can find out a lot about it by going on your computer and entering that to be searched for. But telomeres are caps on the ends of your chromosomes. And there's excellent literature in the medical literature that families that live to be 90 plus and up to 100 and over 100 have long telomere caps on the end of all their chromosomes. I showed you that picture of the fluorescent chromosomes in a white cell. Well, on the ends of all of those fluorescing chromosomes, there's a telomere. But in addition, in the literature, there are families that between 45 and 70, very few people live longer than that. They will die from various diseases associated with aging, and they have short telomeres. Then in the aging laboratory that the federal government runs, they find out this is also true in animals. Those that have short lifetimes have short telomeres. Those that have long life have long telomeres. Well, here this 71-year-old dentist had been taking this more comprehensive nutrition built around the aloe-ace mannin, and his telomeres were that of a 35 to 50-year-old. Well, I scratched my head. And at the time, I was 86 years old. And so I had my telomeres measured, and they're
Mhm.
that of a 45 to 50-year-old. My brother, who is 80, has a better past history. He was in special forces in Europe for a year, and they exercised and jumped out of airplanes, and he swam across the English Channel as part of their physical activity. Well, at 80 years of age, his telomeres are that of the length of a 25 to 35-year-old. And the next person I did was my 57-year-old son in California that is OB-GYN. And he has a very special history that each year he participates in the Ironman and several triathlons, and every week he does the miles on the bicycle and the running and the swimming. And lo and behold, at 57, his telomeres are that of a 15 to 25-year-old.
Wow.
We are slowly, because of no grant,
Yeah.
doing this, and we've got other values that are showing this same picture, that if you have this more comprehensive nutrition built around the active ingredient in aloe plant, which is acetylated mannose or ace-mannan, it lengthens your telomeres, and the longer telomeres are associated with more quality of life, like in those individuals that reverse the objective biomarkers of aging that was published in 670 people. And we are told by the medical school that if we can get 20 patients, which we're slowly trying to do, that are over 50 years of age, and they've been taking this more comprehensive nutrition, so often they took it for some disease process that improves, so they keep taking it. So it's not a waste of money, because the long-term use of this lengthens your telomeres, and that is 100% benefit to the population by more comprehensive nutrition, what its power is to optimize our health. And before I finish, I'd like to say that if you go to your computer and on Outlook, you look for sayings of Hippocrates, who is credited with being the father of Western medicine, you will find out that he wrote, quote, "If we could provide to the individual the proper nutrition and exercise, comma, not too much, not too little, comma, we would have found this and provided the safest pathway to good health," end of quote. Beneath this, another quote he wrote was, "Let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food." Now, this was empiric observations made before our calendar started in ancient Greece. And what I'm showing you is not only in these series of lectures that independent arm's length research is validating the fact that comprehensive nutrition is so powerful and can improve your health. As I say, what we have seen repeatedly since 1985 is that people don't have to go to the doctor, don't have to take medications, don't have to have hospitalizations. And so it's preventive and interventional health management. And as you step back from this, how did all of this incredible provisions for our health that is embedded in every cell in your body in the language of DNA, which is somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times more powerful than the code that is in your cell phone or in your computer. How did all of this come to exist? And I say this is evidence, undeniable, that there is a creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe that has made provisions for us. And that's why I call my first book that's out, The Gift, a Primal Provision. And it basically is built around the fact that in every cell are the programs written in DNA in your chromosomes to take molecules provided in the plant kingdom and hook them together to improve health. And as I say in this series, we show that not only independent long leaf, but actually a farmer serious adversarial group during the Cold War generated information for the Communist Party to try to make people want to be communists, that we will never be able to get the funds to do such research to support the fact that there is incredible power in more comprehensive nutrition. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. McDaniel. It sure makes you wonder who the bad guys are and who has your best intention with statements like that. We do have a question in the comments from our friend Flava Flav. He says, would you recommend the product to somebody with Solgren's? I haven't heard of this.
I know what that is. Fact
or
is,
your thoughts on this disorder. I don't
we've had a patient in Arlington, Texas, with Sjogren's syndrome, and what it is an autoantibody disease that rather than just an autoantibody against thyroid or an autoantibody against the tendons that cause arthritis, or autoantibodies against the kidneys that cause lupus nephritis. People with Sjogren's have multiple antibodies against multiple tissues in your body, and they have all types of complaints. And the quality of life for this person over 80 years of age is incredible, in that in spite of this disease, her telomeres are exactly what they are for her age. You would think that it would be much shorter, and that her clinical alertness and abilities to play the piano and remember have improved. Her memory has improved. And yes, we have had this in at least one patient almost currently, though we have had many individuals over North America and Canada and in 12 foreign countries that have had benefits from autoantibody disease, which the immune system makes an antibody that attaches to your own tissues, and you get an inflammatory response. And if it's bad enough, even degenerative things, and it can reduce your quality of life and your life number of years you're going to live, and certainly the quality of life as you get older.
Yeah, that sounds just miserable, but great to hear that there is some hope out there with the good nutrition. And when we had the list up earlier about the study with the military group and the diabetic results, but then also the cholesterol. I know my cholesterol, I think last year when I went in, the last time I went before I started New Eden, she was like, oh, that's a little high. And we have a history of heart disease in my family on my mom's side and my grandmother's side. And I'm her little mini me. And so, that was a concern to me, and mine has improved greatly from the last time that I went in. So those kind of, actual results, when you see it happening to yourself, it sure really encourages you to stay on top of it and have those great benefits. So I appreciate it. I think we got all of our questions. I know you found that little tidbit of interesting news that I wondered if you wanted to talk about that online or just offline, about the Congresswoman that stepped down today.
I was just before we started this program, I was saying that on the television today that nearly everyone knows about the hundreds of people down in Ghana that took the cyanide and they were just laying all over the place dead. But
at Jonestown,
I had never heard that the a few days before this, a congressman from the United States went down. He had heard about this and was investigating it. And apparently they knew he was going to give a very bad report. And so they sent some of the people and they assassinated him at the airport. And one of his aides was 23 years old, which was, she was shot 6 times and lay on the tarmac for over 20 hours. They were waiting for some type of medical benefit. And she lived and she served in the Congress for 25 years and she's retiring. But
and it's never been an issue or been brought up until now. And she's retiring, and now this story is being told and brought out. It's very interesting.
But there are very important things that are going on that we just may never know about until years after they've happened. And it seems like information that's in the media is more designed to influence us to go in new directions and to attack traditional values and the way we've run this country for years. And they leave out very important events that we need to know about. And this is even happening in the public schools.
Yes, definitely. We need to do a whole episode about that, the bright thinkers, and the options. There's options. I'm a homeschool mom, and there are other options: private schools, Montessori type schools, and then you had come across a group that was partnering with churches called Bright Thinkers, I think it was called.
Well, let me see if I can put something together if you're interested in this. I was a elected member to the Texas State Board of Education in the early 1980s, and it was there that I discovered that the Texas education staff and that the teachers' education schools were indoctrinating our children with anti-free enterprise, anti-constitution, anti-religious faith activities, which we are seeing the results of, I would say, in the streets of our cities now. And that in the early 1980s, I was working on a doctorate in cellular physiology, which is how and why do cells work, which I've been trying to share with you to some degree without trying to get too scientific. Too scientific, because I realize people's number one thing is, what can this do for me? And you don't want to be a biochemist or a geneticist or a molecular biologist. And unfortunately,
well, some people might, but not everyone. I
try to do what I can to make it as simple as possible without using words that come from the Greek or the Latin. Prevailing in the sciences. And anyway, and when I was a graduate student, I was doing tissue culture, and under NASA contracts, working with these engineers at the medical school that miniaturized microscopes and cameras, we sent
the Bible.
We sent into space satellites that were biosatellites with living cells in them to see if they could survive the radiation belts and the lack of gravity. And we were able to show by first time-lapse photography that the cells continued to divide and metabolize going around the Earth when we brought them back and developed the films. And then we sent a satellite where the cells were fixed on a glass plate inside and during the time they were in space, ever so often glutathione was injected into things to freeze them at that state of their metabolism and bring them back and take the slides and with very careful cut them into pieces and analyze for enzymes. Were they making not only structurally looking normal, but were they making metabolic enzymes of normal cells? And in fact, they were. And so eventually, uh, animals and humans were sent into space, and of course, they lived there. But before they sent them, they wanted to know we don't want to hurt anybody, do no harm. Well, these same engineers have been aware of what's happening in our public schools and indoctrinating our children, and how it's spread to the universities and particularly to the media. And it's really causing chaos in our society. Well, they took textbook content and curriculum and digitalized it so that every church or temple can have a private school, and it's so flexible you can even use this material for homeschooling or to supplement public schooling. And it's the important thing is by using a slate, a little computer slate, and the web, they can provide private schools for 1/10 to 1/20 what's being charged right now in major churches in Houston, Texas. In other words, rather than costing $10,000 to $22,000 per student per year for a private school, you can do this from K1 to K12 for less than or no more than $1,000 per student per year, which is 1/20 to 1/20 the cost. And many parents, particularly during this shutdown of the schools during the China virus pandemic, found out that they're not teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic in the schools. They're indoctrinating students with what I call Marxist, Leninist collectivism and socialism, and atheism, and lack of human life having a value of secular humanism. So this is an effort to effectively, because in 1933, John Dewey, said to be the father of progressive education, said that we will use the public schools as an instrument of social change. And boy, have they done it. And I won't go into the details, but I will get into that, trying to put together a program for you since you brought the subject up.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. It's a great discussion to have. It's one of the, the institutions that we've trusted for so long and that have been weaponized against we the people. And people need to know, and they need to know that there's options out there. So
Well, it's even been weaponized against the family, parental authority and influence of the church, and to deny that the spiritual dimension even exists. And as I say, again, what I've been presenting you has been something that just overwhelmed me, of that we are finding evidence in nature and in every cell in our body that there is a creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe that is active. And I've been presenting you with evidence you've got to ask, how in the world did this come to be? Well, it's certainly not, when people say God, a big gray-headed old man. But there is an influence. As I say, the Sistine Chapel that has this old gray-headed man touching Adam to create life is sort of a philosophical travesty. However, if you look at life and what's going on in every leaf or blade of grass, every cell in your body, you're left with, geez, something very mysterious and wonderful that can only be called a creative, organizing, designing power in the universe is active. And even on our product that we call our dietary supplement is a tribute to this dimension. Without getting into it, I put on there, never take this nutrition on an empty spirit.
That's right. I love that.
I'm trying to make your spirit galvanized and knowledgeable, that you can move from just faith without evidence to knowledge based on scientific demonstration and trial and error.
Yeah. Well, we don't have anything against gray-haired gentlemen, but we're excited to hear people talk about, receiving God or the universe, this organized power that obviously does wonderful things. If you've ever watched anything from, a cut heel on your hand to have the honor of watching a child grow in your home or around you, there's something here that created all of that. That's, we didn't just come from slugs. Sorry. So, well, Dr. McDaniel, I appreciate you again, and I look forward to our talks. You guys make sure to give us a like, share the video, and get this great information out there. And give us some feedback in the comments below on YouTube in the channel. And make sure that you leave any questions that you have for Dr. McDaniel there, and we can check back on those again next time. Everybody take care. Thank you.
Thank you.